So here we are then, Chris. We're moving now into the final section. You've already been to New Zealand. You've been there and come back,
Yes.
and we're moving into much more landscape-based work. Up until
Yes,
now, the landscape has played only a minor role, if at all, in your work.
Yeah.
But now we suddenly move into the landscape and sometimes in quite dramatic ways.
Yes.
And even this is a complete change from your normal style of work.
It is. Yes, we've moved away. I'm talking about methodological things now, a methodological map. And the map takes in this section here. This piece is the blank. It doesn't belong to the property of the land itself. It's a very large piece of land, about 1,000 acres. And in the centre is where it all happened, where I spent.
And this is not far from here, we ought to add. This is.
It's about 2 or 3 miles out of the centre of Cheltenham.
Yes.
And the road up is to here where we park. And all the things that happen on this thing is where I stayed and contemplated over a very long period of time. In fact, I think I talk about 5, 6 years of studying in this area. Only one stepping out from the direction was this line across, which I marked down as about 50 miles as the crow flies. It's probably a bit more than that, but roughly speaking, something like that. So
it's a mythological landscape in many respects. It's mythological in terms of your own personal association with it, but also it's riddled with archaeological remains as well. So it's mythological in a wider sense.
Well, it goes back a very long way. Belas Knap itself is over 2,000 years old, which is to this side here, and there's a Barrow, which was we'll come to that in the section later on. But as
so you're talking. You mentioned very early on in this section visionary landscapes.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about the visionary element.
This is a tricky one, really. I think I'd call it, if I can find the right word for it, it's visionary, and it's a dream place. It's a kind of dream image, of a reverie, of moving and looking for things and sitting for a very long period of time. And by sitting for a long period of time, something is revealed in the landscape where I'm sitting. So one of my sittings would be what I called the stone pit here. And it was a place for me to sit and contemplate the wall faces there, which we will come to in due time. I started off with a little place here called the Kissing Stone. It was a fancy name we picked up. I walked with my friend. It's one of our favourite walking places. And it sticks up out of the ground, rounded, and it's very, very ancient. It's the base rock of the Jurassic pit there, really. Yes. And I'll show photographs later of my images of it. And I thought of it as the Blarney Stone, a sort of place, you kiss it, or the Pope comes along, he just lands and he goes down and kisses it, and then he's part of it.
It's a bit like there's the Blowing Stone as well, which...
Oh, that's a good word.
Well, I'll take you there sometime. It's just below White Horse Hill,
oh, right.
which we'll also come to in a moment, and I'll mention the Blowing Stone then, because it links very much with your Blarney Stone.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Why.
Oh, good. So as we work around, we've got what I call watery bottom round here. It's a big curve, and it goes down, 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 right to the pit here. And there's Postlip Hall, a fine ancient hall down in the base. And the warren, where there are supposed to be lots of rabbits. I never saw one, incidentally. The Roman camp to this side, just here. Belas Knap we touched on, and various, well, there's a park here, a land which is difficult to climb through. West Down, which is a very important part of what I was to work at for about 3 or 4 years, and found some extraordinary images. So you could say I was in a dream state, a semi-dream state. I have to be careful when we say this, because we're talking about visionary things. Well, a lot of people visionary, oh yes, a lot of nonsense, But if you're in this mood, a lot of people think like this. And I could cite 1 or 2 of them.
So this is, in a sense, the overview map of this part of
This
the
is the whole site in which I did most of the work, yeah.
So where would you like to take us now in that map?
I think we'll start at the beginning, which is down beneath there, so we'll have to lift those up.
Cotswolds onto the Berkshire Downs now, so probably something like 40 miles as the crow flies, into a very similar landscape, also full of archaeological features, including this white horse, which is now known to date back to the Bronze Age. Probably one of the most iconic images that we have in Britain of the ancient landscape, and as you've already pointed out, best appreciated from the air.
Yes, it's extraordinary. I'd love to have gone up, but I had to see it from the ground and walked along it. And here's the line of the horse. I could hardly call that a horse. It could be a dragon almost. It could be anything. There's an extraordinary end piece to it. But I was interested in something else when I went there, which comes into one of the first pictures. And I'm not sure how well we can get a good image of this. We can put that down now and bring this one up. And this very long view is one I'd like to concentrate. I'm not sure how clearly it will come out in the image.
It's the manger.
The manger I'm looking at down here, but what I'm interested in is the shapes I found in the manger. The manger is a very interesting name, isn't it? Lots of tiny sheep, not visible in this photograph, of course, that spread across. And it's an amazing shape. When I first went there, I walked on the top and looked down at this view, but didn't go and paint it. I didn't come back for another 6 months. And I thought, I must look at that lower view. It's so interesting. So I settled myself down about here and sat down and just looked at this extraordinary curve. It's a wonderful shape. And I noticed a bulge here. Seemed obvious to me, but it's too dark to see it clearly, probably. And arms and things sticking out, jutting out. And I started to sketch it. And it became something like this. Now, here's very much a bit of visionary landscape making, really. I'm inventing. These are the sort of forms I think I saw in this landscape. I have a drawing here that shows another view of it, and I bring it out a bit more clearly, I think. A dip here. It seemed to me something like a sheep asleep. Forward breast here, a hand coming round, the thigh, the hump around here, slipping round to the back here. The little tiny picture of the horse on the top edge here. And I thought, I'm drawing this. So this is one of the sketches I did at the time.
And out of that came what subsequently I think you called an Earth Mother figure.
Well, yes, this is how I saw it. Very much an Earth Mother figure. And while I was drawing it, these arms seem to be growing out here. In a sense, they are just visible, coming round here. You can hint at them, can't you? And you can see a line coming along here.
You know, I've spent a lot of time in this landscape because I used to live in the village close by. For 10 years I lived there and walked regularly, and I never saw that until you've pointed it out. And now the moment you've pointed it out, I can't get this vision out of my mind.
Can see
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
So that power of association is remarkable, isn't it?
Well, I think this is what reverie is for a lot of painters. I'll talk about some of these painters who work in this way soon and show I think we work in a similar manner. But going back to this, what happened to me while I was sitting down was this arm came round and it stopped short there. But the trouble was it was throbbing somewhat. And I felt very uneasy about this. This is where the downside of, if it is a downside, of reverie, that place where you meander in a semi-dream state, and it suddenly struck me as a very uncomfortable place indeed. It was almost bidding me to come and touch it. It was so alive and well, or unwell, depending how you're looking at it. There was a line across, a very fine line with a few pegs, so there was a barrier there. But it would have been possible to climb through. But I thought, if I touch that, I've had it. It was a feat.
That's extraordinary, Chris, isn't it? Yeah. Because you and I have talked about going back there together at some point, and for me it's a warm, welcoming landscape, but you still carry with you that both a welcoming side, but also the slight reservation about whether you should really be in this particular.
Well,
So
yes,
carry
it was a
both.
dark place for me because I'm now hankering back to my childhood. Now, I've been through all the dream therapy, and we touched on what it was like to be a child in my situation, away from the parent, away from the mother, sent away somewhere, and howling to come back home because I was so much alone. So I think it was tied to that. So in a way, although it was a very welcome image and I wanted to draw it, it also had a dark side. And it was the dark side that was rearing up. And I just wanted to show this little book. Seamus Heaney, writing about Wordsworth, describes a little scene here which I think sums it up in a way. He says, William Wordsworth imagined and heard the woodlands breathing on his neck. And he was rowing on a boat. And as he turned round, he saw great piles of cliffs coming up behind him. And he rowed furiously away as fast as he could. And it was that fear of, he was terrified as he rowed. He was only a boy, admittedly. And I'm a grown man, and I'm affected in the same way. And I was petrified. I thought, this is not a comfortable place. And all my gear was out.
I'd just like to bring in one other thing which may or may not be relevant. This is an extraordinary place by any stretch of the imagination. It is remarkable, topographically remarkable. It's remarkable as an archaeological survivor. I've just recently subscribed to a magazine called Earthlines, which is full of very interesting sort of countryside writing.
Right.
And the issue that arrived just before Christmas had a piece on this site. And the person who wrote it, who I think's name is Porteous, it's a very fine piece of writing, I have to say. She describes walking up the road. There's a road here that's just under the brow of the White Horse section of the hill. But this is almost a sheer cliff going up to the White Horse of a couple of 100 metres. I mean,
Right.
we're talking about, this is a monumental scale.
Yeah.
And she said, at this point underneath the White Horse, there is a vortex effect, so that you can be standing here whispering to a friend, and somebody on the White Horse can hear every word you're saying.
Oh.
200 metres up. Now that's remarkable, and so this landscape, because of its topography, has sound properties, which may have, her argument is, of course, it may have attracted people there in the first place to actually build monuments.
That's
like the White
fascinating,
Horse.
isn't
It's
it?
a very interesting thesis,
Yeah.
and there's been a lot of archaeological research on the soundscapes of archaeological sites. But just tying that together, this site had a profound effect on you.
Yes, it
clearly
did.
had a profound effect on
And it still
previous
had.
generations who've been there.
Well, I went back 6 years later. 6 years? I know, a much shorter time. Say, about a year later. Went back to the site and looked at it again. And of course, it had calmed down. But what I always do when I get home, having done drawings like that, is to do a lot of drawing later at home. So this is what happened. We turn a page. We start to see some rather interesting images. In this side, I've recreated the form of horse, dog, whatever. There it is lying down, and the arm is well round here. You can see how powerful it is. And the sun is staring at me. And above, a sleeping, more quiet one. But then we come to a much darker scene altogether. A womb place, I call it. And I didn't like that place at all because it took me back to the beginning, which is really what I think it was about. It was going on to the dark side. And I've been there a few times. It was part of the mental breakdown I was in, I think. So I climbed over. I did go into it in the afterwards. And I'm taken down. I've become a skeleton. And I'm going down into the pit, under and around. And then on the other side, I'm being reborn. So, yucky. Not a place.
These are quite sinister images.
They are. And then the White Horse is leaping up. He's out of it. So it wasn't a happy place. There's a lot of writing about it, which I haven't time. We can't go into all that, but that can be read later.
I'm just trying to see where we are time-wise now. Where are we? When did this is after New Zealand?
We have the dates in there, so we better.
It's after the yes. It's 1993.
Yes, check.
August, here we are,
the
August
top.
1993.
Yeah.
So it's after that really dark period, and this
Yeah.
is in many respects the coming out, the real.
Well, this is coming out,
of
but you've got to come out. You've got to go down into it. This is the problem. You go into the dark side, you see, and this is very much the dark side. You die to it, so to speak, and then you find you're reborn. You know, it isn't a death, of course, but you don't want to go there. So that's the other side, and that's
the symbolism here is extraordinary again, because up here, on just beyond the Whitehorse, is the Uffington Iron Age hill fort, and of course there are many burials like this.
yeah. So
Yes,
that's where one was taken with one's sort of image, and it continued. So we had another one here. The little boy. When I was a boy, I was known as a little mischief, you know. So, well, all right, I'll draw it like that. So he's touching down and trying to get response and not getting any. And then there's a picture there behind you, which needs bringing up, which deals in a comical sort of way. There's me as a painter. I think it's the one. No, it isn't. It's this one. Bring that up. I think it'll probably just stand on there.
It will, yeah.
I'm not sure if that's leaning too much. Should it stand more vertical?
Let me just organise things a bit here, move these out of the way.
Let's remove that now. We don't need it. Just stand it on there and put these up.
Yeah.
I think that'll stand quite well. Yeah. What? I'm not sure if there's a shine.
So we're still
Is that clear?
at Whitehorse Hill.
Or do we need to tilt that a little? I have to.
No,
I'm going to ask the photographer now. We'll butt in for a minute. Is it shining? Should I stand it up more? It's all right. Okay, so the image is upside down, by the way. Should we put it back? Let's pause for the...
there we are. That's better.
Here we are. So I said, right, I'm going to go and paint this beast. Of course, I did it at home. I didn't go... And she's got lots of breasts on her now, so she's a totally different creature. She's one that... There's a picture further on in the book. If you keep turning. There, the bottom left. Now, who is that?
Yes.
Would you like to describe it to me? Who's down on that side?
Well, you're obviously painting.
Here I am, sitting on the little stool painting.
An ambiguous creature, which is part horse, part human.
Yes, it's a real mix, isn't it? With three big tits. And look at the image on the other side, and we've gone to another part of the world altogether. And who is that? In Ephesus. Somebody who is recalling the same image years ago.
Oh, here.
Yes. You might like to read what it says on the bottom line there.
Yes, this is the. There was first the. This is called. No, sorry, Chris. I haven't. It's not actually here.
The very bottom line, the title of it.
This is Artemis.
Yes.
Yes, Artemis of Ephesus.
This image is found in many books and so on about the past, and it's a ground for rebirth, isn't it?
Right. No, I don't know. So this is something I don't. So I think you need.
Well,
to
I didn't look
explain
deeply
more.
into it.
No, tell us about the Artemis.
Well, I don't know
story.
anything about it. I saw the picture, and it's obviously an image of birth, where you get rebirth. It's all about life itself, as far as you can get to it. It's a very ancient symbol. I know more than you do about it. But when I saw that image and what I'd drawn here, I could see the connection.
Yes, now I see.
It was the link, you
Yes,
see.
It's this image with the multiple breasts.
Yeah,
Yes,
quite.
Yeah, and that does recur throughout, doesn't it, in a number of cultures?
Yes,
Yes.
very much so.
Yeah.
And that was a very ancient culture, going right back, I don't know how far, very, very ancient culture. So here I was drawing it out of my own imaginative thought. And then came across that later. I thought, that's a strange thing to come across. So I spent quite a time drawing that strange creature. And everything's calm at top. There's the white horse still lying calmly down, the scene behind. That's it. That's the story.
Well, it's not quite.
No, it's not.
Because
there's a
this
twist.
one,
There's a twist in the tale.
There's a twist in this picture.
Yeah. Now this is the downside. Well, you can call it a downside, or otherwise. Here's the young boy having a chat with a horse, and a very strange horse he is. He's very distorted, and he's very aggressive. He's not a happy face at all. Tit's still there, a great leg coming down here with a high heel, very high heel. And I thought, I want a bit of sympathy here, and I'm not going to get it. So that was the end of that particular story.
And this was the last piece.
It was the last piece of that section. Yes.
So we're still in a dark place.
Yes,
at this point.
And it's that particular hillside that I knew very little about, and that's the payoff. And I thought, oh dear. However, there was one picture before it, which is in the book, and I haven't got the original. I'm not sure where that is or where it went, of the me lying calmly down amid it all, just a couple of pages on. That's it. Now that one
is the little monkey with sleeping creature?
Yes, and there I am asleep in the setting, and I thought, oh, it's not so bad after all. It's quite a nice place. There I'm sleeping, and there's lined up, wrapped up in it, and some strange creature in the sky.
Yeah.
But that was the image.
But we've seen this image earlier. This is cropped up. This image is cropped up in earlier work of yours. I'm sure of it.
You can remember one.
Yeah.
Yes, it probably does. I don't give it a name.
It's another one of these ambiguous
Yes,
images.
yes.
So there's still a lot of ambiguity, isn't there?
Yes, it's a sort of metamorphosis taking place. It's all to do with this.
So it is. I mean, this may be a simplistic question, but is coming through such depression also a matter of resolving ambiguity, or is that just too simplistic to describe it?
I wish I knew. I don't know the answer to this, really. I only know that one has to go there and down into it in order to come out of it. So I think that's how it works.
It raises lots of interesting questions about the relationship between ambiguity and rationality and so on. And we try to, we feel secure when we can rationalise things, and if we can't rationalise them,
I think it's a very secret place, and when you're doing it, you can't share it with anyone else. It's very private, and so on. Paul Klee is also very much one of the influences in the way that Sutherland has. He makes marvellously beautiful images and shapes in it, and here, such a magic somehow. And I call that also the same sort of reverie of looking at things and finding figures in there that don't exist at first, but if you're very patient, they start to come out and shine out. So that's really what it's about. It's about this transformation in looking at landscape, usually landscape, and you find things, and you don't want to be disturbed. You lose it if you're disturbed. It's very important to have the silence. In fact, the images don't appear unless you're on your own. That's how it is. So these two are very much part of it. Nash in England, there are plenty of examples of that too.
And Nash with his paintings of Whittenham Clunt, which he returned
that is
time and time again.
I think that's the final image, which is so splendid, of the clumps. Yeah.
I think latest research shows that he painted it over 40 times.
Yeah.
So that landscape almost became an obsession for him. He never really tells us why. Why did he keep going back to that place?
Because he can always find more.
Yes.
And that's why, you only go back when you know there's more material to be found, you see. That's what it's about. And I remember sitting for a year in part of Cleeve Hill, sitting, waiting for something to happen almost. Very boring. And then something suddenly pops up and you think, good God, there it is. And this is your particular reverie about it. It sparkles and it comes alive. There are plenty of examples in section 2, which we'll be dealing with. I think we reached the end of section 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, we've taken a detour out to Whitehall's Hill, and now we're coming back closer to home, back to Cleve Common, and we're picking up the mythical map again, and moving on to Belas Knap.
Belas Knap here, which is to this side of the map, and it's a very important site. It was restored, I think, somewhere in the previous century.
And this is another long barrow, isn't it?
It's a long barrow, and
so it's
here's a
Neolithic.
photograph of it. And it's a lovely clear shape. This is a false hole. It looks as though it's supposed to go, but it doesn't get anywhere. The main barrows are on the side. And I remember when I was a boy, very young, and went to the local museum, all the skulls, or a lot of the skulls were in there, quite a large number. I don't know where they went. I've never traced them through. They must be stored away somewhere.
They were in Cheltenham Museum, weren't they?
Yes, Cheltenham Museum.
Mm.
And there's a barrow at the back, and two on that side, and a single one here. About 2,500 years, I think, this one was roughly to being put together. And restored, say, 100 years ago. And the shape was basically there. Very good, and lovely clear shape. And so this is where we begin, this story. I went there, and again, I went there on a quiet time when there's no one else about. And I laid on the top. It was a fairly warm day, and it had a sort of vibration about it, as if it might be alive. Extraordinary thing, really. But it was a remarkable place. It's rarely visited, actually. It's a bit out of the way. You don't see a lot of it. And I was reading a story at the time about Gilgamesh, which is going back another 2,000 behind that, so about 4,000 years old, of a god and goddess, and they meet up, and it's a long story, and I can't really talk about it through now. It's very complex. At least it's not very complex, but to talk about it at this stage isn't appropriate, except it did bring into mind where I was in this place. It sort of jumped back a century behind, and so on. So it was a very marvellous sacred place. And the reverie started to take over again. And I thought, this is a humming place. I like this. So I stayed there for quite a while. And one of the pictures that I drew was called the Cedar Forest. An image here. It's quite a small image, and it might.
Yes, here it is.
And I haven't got it because I
This
sold
one.
it a long time ago. And it's a sort of peaked cap, as this is the forest place, and the forest is the giant himself. And the two friends who go in there have to confront it. And I'm not going to go into the storyline of what that's about, but it's a very strong image. And it took me on to the next page, which, and I'm in a rather dark place, but somewhere among these, if I can find it, here we are. We have this. And I call it Resurrection.
It's a very vibrant image.
It's very strong, actually, yes. And I was in a sort of cocoon, wrapped up, floating on the water. And it was a dark place. I wasn't too happy about it, but it looked as though someone was coming to my aid, taking me out of it. So that was comforting in its own right. So I gave it a title, The Angel Bird Rejuvenates Elderly Man. So that was me all right. So rejuvenation. So perhaps I'm going to come back to life again. And there's a bit of text about that at the bottom. I said
Yes.
it's one of the most difficult periods of the therapy period for me. So much work was accomplished, and yet feeling psychologically very weary and worn out by it, and depressed by it, really. I didn't seem to be making much progress. I seemed to be slipping backwards rather than forward. And yet...
But this is quite an optimistic image.
It is, yes. So obviously it wasn't so black as it felt. But on the other side of that picture, we have that and this.
Yes.
Now, this seems to be a skeletal form. The head's right back. Very little reassurance in that. That's a very dark place indeed. But beneath it, much more reassuringly, a figure jumping across me, a bull, as if trying to rejuvenate and resurrect me. So that was upbeat one. So it was down and up and down and up. The big swings of mood were going on. And I dwelt on that quite a long time.
But in a sense, this is also ambiguous, isn't it? Because it's interpreted by you as the bull trying to resurrect you, but it could also be seen as a threatening gesture as well.
I didn't feel it was, actually. Yeah, I know what you mean. No, I thought it was leaping over. It wasn't going to land on me. It was going to leap across. So, no, I didn't think... I thought it was a more upbeat image, really. Funny how it relates to the past, not this country at all, as if it belonged to the Far East or Egypt.
Well, Picasso immediately comes to mind whenever there's a bull of that
yes,
sense.
Or even further afield, you know.
Yes.
Mesopotamia, anywhere, far afield, really. Anyway, these stories came out, and then, following that, I was brought up short by a memory of something happened in my childhood. It's the one behind. I wonder if we can bring it forward without removing all this.
Let's try and do that. I'll bring it forward, because...
Yeah. It might just take the weight on there. Whoops.
We'll get away with it.
There
we are.
Just.
Yes.
Okay, here we are. I give it a title. I'll call it The Father and the Son. I had to read a bit of this. It goes back a long time, and I can't recall all of it. These dreams have been activated by my subconscious. Not long afterwards, I called this vivid dream about it. A small child waits beside the gates of a large orphanage. His mother is about to arrive, having heard a trumpet call. So the child has made a trumpet call. And this shape here signifies the trumpet and the hounds coming across. The father describes meeting a tiny child, emaciated and slightly rat-like, standing before him, his upper teeth missing. The son had lost part of his teeth. The father asks, "Are you sad?" "Yes," replied the child. And the father says, "I've come to take you home." And the child whispers, "I can't believe it, I can't believe it." And waking from the dream, I recall my own childhood from the broken teeth. I actually brought some teeth during the war years. And where are we? Yes. And for a while, I was in touch with the inner child again. And this was very strange, because there's a hand here, and he's got a big hand here, and his other hand has transferred itself into the shape of the trumpet. And the child, who died long ago, so it's an image of the child, years back, but I had been sent to an orphanage when I was about 12, for 2 or 3 years.
It's interesting how, in the story so far, the mother figure has been very prominent in all that you've spoken
Or absent.
Or absent.
You see, yeah.
Now, the emergence of the father figure, quite late on
Yes,
in this whole process.
Yeah.
So it's very significant in that respect, isn't it?
And at this age, I wasn't able to understand the nature of the mother sending me to places like this. My brother also, younger brother, also went to the same orphanage in North London. We were there throughout the war until the war was declared. And Chamberlain came back with no success, as you know, and I was sent home. For the first time I was sent home, and I had a home base, so that was very encouraging. But this was a rather dark place, as you can imagine, at that stage.
Yes.
And then there was another dream under it, which is me coming out of a tomb place, which is down here, the middle image, rather interesting one, really. And I'm coming out of a dead creature on the ground, which looks like slightly Christ-like, and I've got a wing, and I've got to take off. So that was an up-placed beast. So things are perhaps turning a little.
But this is also an ambiguous figure, because it's both male and female.
Yes, that too. Well, that comes into the story with me, because I've always got this ambiguity in myself. This one half male, half female, which I'm not, but you know, one didn't know, because there hadn't been a starting point. So if I turn a page, I seem to have missed something.
No, we're still in
No, it's
Belas
all
now.
right. Yeah. And we now come to, yes, we come to one more picture, which is, where is it? Oh, here it is, here. I think that one has to come out. It's rather heavy.
It does.
I'm going to put this little one on. Right. There we are. It's quite a small image, but it's sharp and hopefully clear enough. We're going back to the original Belas now. And I'm lying on the tomb, I'm thinking about it. It seemed to be a rather good place to be.
And you talk about it existing on different levels simultaneously.
Yes, I start off by lying on the chest. This is the breast. Actually, the little tomb is right down here. But I've got an image of myself lying on top of it, so I'm dreaming. This is a dream sequence, of course. And I don't think I'm a poet at all, so my dreams doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's what it felt like. I was stranded. And Gaia, as I saw her as Gaia, the great Earth god creature. And somehow it wasn't sufficient, I say. And I reached down to a darker Neolithic dirt place. A sort of, yes, I just occasionally put a bit of text, but not a lot. Yes, I'm not a poet in any sense. But it did reflect the feeling of the day very much.
Yes.
And that rounded out that poem. Yeah.
But we haven't finished with Belas Knap, have we? We've got a couple more images that come out of the work there that have been clearly derived from the
They did.
the trumpet call.
Yes, that's
and
quite
life vessel. You were talking earlier today about life vessel. Is it appropriate to look at that?
Yes,
now?
I don't. This is one of my little lost images. I literally
Let me
need.
bring it up here. The two images we're talking about now, which are clearly derived from the earlier works we've discussed with Belas Knap. We've got trumpet call here, and this image is fascinating, isn't it? Life vessel with all the movement within that.
Well, this is something I made out of pottery, because I was entering pottery now and I found it an interesting subject. And so I made a shape just like this and created these images on it. It sort of is a uplift, taking off again, isn't it? You can see images lying down and so on. I didn't take it further than that, I just thought it was an interesting image. But the one above, with the girl blowing the trumpet, this was an echo of a call. And to the left side, there's a curious little creature. I call it a fairy tale. The whole thing is a fairy tale, really. There's a river flowing through. So it's really about water and life. And it's rejuvenation. It's really about rejuvenation.
And interesting how this stage of your work is taking you into different forms of expression, different media as well. So
Yes.
you know we're moving into pottery now.
Yes, I'm working pottery now. That's another important factor. Yes.
Yes. And then finally, on my my annotated copy here, I've written at the top Richard Jefferies. This image here is almost identical to an image it's in one of the Richard Jefferies books. Richard Jefferies was one of these mystic poets from the Victorian period who lived near Swindon and actually wrote a lot about Whitehall's Hill, for example.
Interesting.
And there's an image of him sitting on Liddington Hill Fort,
Right.
almost identical to this. Now, you've never seen Richard Jefferies.
No, nothing about him. No.
But the image is almost identical, and that's an extraordinary, for me, an extraordinary connection.
Well, I was thinking about little putties up in the air, flying about very happily, down in whatever. So,
Yeah, okay.
end of story.
End of story.
that story.
Well, Chris, we're going to carry on with this theme of visionary landscape, and today we're going to just move around a little on this map, moving from the area of Cleve Common that you described earlier, down to the south of Belas Knap and into this area called Westwood.
Yes, and we're going to walk along up here, round until we reach the Barrow of Belas Knap here, which has been greatly restored and it's a lovely shape today. And looking due south here to Westwood. This is the distant wood, which we'll see in a moment in the picture behind.
Yes, and here we have it as a wonderful pastoral scene. And
a straight, direct drawing, I'd call this one, really.
yeah,
Very little change to it, but it had, to me, a unique shape. I couldn't define what it was. Some places do, some places don't. I think part of it was the sweep. This is a walk for horses, and occasionally you see horses coming along this track, and the way it swept in around here and embraced this little shape here intrigued me, and the fall of the hill up here, and the growth of the plants here. All of it indicated something that I couldn't at that moment see. So I thought I had to stay with it quite a long time. There was a growth also, plantation here, which over a few years will be a total forest again.
Yes, yeah.
So that's what I saw the first day.
And this undergoes a quite remarkable transformation from a pastoral scene into a figurative landscape through many different versions before you end up with the final one. Take us through that process, because the end product of this is actually very important in the whole story, isn't it?
Okay, let's do that. So I'll start at the beginning. My own picture of yours is the same. Turning the first page, I have some images. We'll have to take this down now, because that was the opening scene. We don't require it any longer. And there is a lot of small pictures that I can only place here. They're very tiny, and I cannot trace them at this moment. They seem to be packed away, and I can't find them. The two here were different views, turning slightly to one direction, then to another. But this deep-cut valley, I was intrigued with, that shape. That's the Westwood in the distance here, and the crops coming down to meet it in the centre, and a bit of the crop that you saw in the original picture. That was the opening scene. And then I met a character. Well, I met two characters, really. I don't know if that needs to be lifted up. I think that's all right there. Here's the first character with the bent arm, a log of wood, cut down and just discarded. And then later, another one facing away from me, and they're also facing in the distant direction. So it became a landscape of a conversation between two figures.
And this one is a stone, is a standing stone, and this is a large log.
Lots of log. And in the distant, one of the fossils I found on the hill. Now about the fossils, this is the bed of a Jurassic landscape, very ancient, 500 million, a colossal time ago. And these pieces of stone actually lay on the bed of this, and I found two on the first day I went there, which was remarkable. It was so remarkable that I had to think, if I'm in the bed, the water at that time must be high above. So I did this picture here.
Yes, because these are sea urchins, aren't they?
These are sea urchins.
So it indicates a time when this land was actually underwater.
Yes, and so this time, I'm going back in time. I felt in my own image, I was trying to float back into it. And so I put some fish at the top level, indicating where the water level might have been. So I'm deep beneath it. And these are some of the logs and pieces I found. I've still got the track we saw in the first picture. Still there's landscape in the distance and the piece coming round. So we've still got the curve in it. We can identify that. So that's where it began. But I picked up two of the fossils, and at the top of the picture here, and I've enlarged them greatly to show the shape, and I shrank myself down in size and sort of hung to them. I embraced this one. I made myself into a miniature, so to speak. And I sort of spread and grew, became bigger and bigger.
Yes.
It's an extraordinary feeling that was. Incidentally, I think I scrapped that one as well. Remember, I cancelled a lot of paintings.
Let me remind you, though, of what you've actually written in the book at this stage about the mood you were in. You say this: after years of unearthing so much personal history during the therapy sessions, I'd imagined the depressions would gradually decrease. On the contrary, the reverse seemed to be happening. The constant attempts to lift oneself out of the condition stirred up things I'd been avoiding for years, and led me soon to some archaeological digging into the seams of some subconscious and this particular landscape. So the landscape is a metaphor for digging deep, and the archaeology and the fossil record helped that process.
It did very much. And so digging deep, we have a little picture here next. I'll take that. I can superimpose it there. This is a dark picture, it may not show up very well. Here I am unearthing some of the items underneath, and I think I list some of the items here. In one of these pages you'll find the items I've listed and found down there. Sea urchins, devil's toenails, urchin scallops, all sorts of things you might find on this inner sea bed. And there they were, just beneath the surface. I could actually find them and hold them. I thought that was extraordinary. So there I was, bending over, looking at some of these places. Some of the drawings, I've just added that to make it clearer in the picture, but he doesn't exist. It's really a little round tump.
But already the figurative elements are beginning to emerge, aren't they, in this landscape?
Yeah.
And we'll see these transform later.
Yeah.
But already we're looking at a movement from the purely pastoral into something that's going to become figurative.
I think so, well I hope, and I'm sure that's the way it's growing. And I found another one, if I just move that across a minute and put this one just above. These are some of the fossils I've found. It's an interesting little group in its own. And it's hard to find the landscape there because I've superimposed things upon top of it. But all sorts of little plants and so on are growing out of it. So I'm quite interested in that sort of drawing work. And that led, excuse me, on the next page, at the bottom, the picture that you have here.
Yeah. It's
And I
this one.
described that as having a very sort of human skin-like feel about it. Do you think we should hold that a bit higher? It's such a miniature picture to show. You see how it's all smoothed out and tight? It's got a feeling of a figure.
Yes.
A living thing. And I thought that was very interesting as well. It was leading in the direction I was looking for. And then, right, on the next page, I found a whole new image. This one here. Again, I haven't got the original. They're rather too big. And I found a dancing figure for the first time. Let's look at the landscape as it was, the curving land where the horse riders used to come in the day. This is beginning to grow and flow because I've been here a month or two now, coming back to it once a week roughly, and finding it was beginning to grow and flower. And I found a little dancing figure here, skipping round as if it was a ballet dancer. And this part of the plant is developing and getting much richer. So we're moving to a whole new landscape, growing out of this original thing. And this after probably 2 years of looking and coming back to it and sort of staying with it. And so it began to change. It was transformed from its original shape to something quite other.
And this incremental development is really quite interesting, isn't it? Because you've emphasised to me today in conversation that you have to give this time. So you see little bits of it developing with each visit, and each visit brings something new.
Except it suddenly rushes on, a very big flush. And I became so overwhelmed by finding it, I started finding myself in another position altogether. In fact, this is the first time ever that I can recall going out into the countryside and falling asleep. So here I am nodding off, and I actually went to sleep for a little while. But all sorts of odd things are happening in the landscape. There's some figures here. You can see forms and figures, some over here. And then in the sky, there seem to be figures floating across and moving as if it's got a story to tell. So I went into a reverie here again, completely asleep. And when I woke up, I found a great image all ready for me to look at, which is the next big picture that I put up on the main screen.
Yes, and you pointed out that actually there are lots of female forms
Lots
in here.
of female forms.
Here,
so they're all women,
here.
really.
Yes.
So in a way, it's almost the reverse of the very first scene that we looked at, where I met a monster who rejected me out of hand. It was a very negative feeling, and this is turning around a totally different direction. So if I just remove the top of this, I'll bring the big picture over and down. Lift this down for a minute. put it up top. Oh, it's quite a heavy piece. I think we get the swing a bit there,
Yeah.
more or less. I'll turn around a fraction for a moment this way so I can refer to it slightly.
So this is spring.
This is spring. I gave it the name spring. It was given other names as well, but it started as that. So it's someone obviously exposing herself. So it's Gaia in a live form, not that negative image we had right at the beginning in the first sequence. And on the left, we've got the flowering out. It really is spring over there. Things are growing, lush. And then on the other side, wombs, a breast coming forth, big swinging arm, and there's a hint of a head at the top right. It's vague, it has to be vague, because it would have to be seen like that.
Yeah.
So this rather big figure was the one that overwhelmed me, and I think I nodded off to sleep again after that.
This is, to me, a very optimistic picture.
Was, after all the rejection.
Yes,
of the early
and
work.
it's got a lot of life, a lot of colour, a lot of enthusiasm and hope about the future in it.
Yeah, and it was a welcoming form, not a negative one. What a change!
Yes, and also, I mean, the transformation. No, that's a later version, but I want to show what it started from.
Oh, the beginning, yes.
I can hold this up, Chris.
Yeah, I'll hold that. Let's put that down for a minute.
There we are. So that's where it started.
And it'd be impossible to find that.
Wouldn't it?
in the
Yes.
original
Yeah.
sequence.
Just looking at those two together, at where it started and where it ended up, and that was over a period of 2 years, you say?
I
About
think
2
we
years.
covered 3 years on this.
Yes.
Coming back over a period of time. So yes, that's really what happened there. And all these little images on the lower section here are some of the roots I found wrapped up in the soil, lifted up between the backside here and so on. With another sweep here. So the beginning are indications of the underparts of the story.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the far distance, fading away, the sun's up and bits of landscape appear. So yes, it was quite a transformation from the beginning.
And this spring went through a number of versions. This is the final one, isn't it?
Yes, there's one little one above
Yes.
that shows another view, but it's very small. And whether it will come up, I don't know. This little tiny one here, which
Yeah.
I'll call version 1.
Yes.
Which has basically the same stuff in it, but it's not so elaborate and evocative as this one.
Yes.
But you can see hints of figure and hand. You can
Yeah.
see the hand clearly marked in that case. This is still quite well developed.
Mm.
So yes, that was another stage, and I did others. Yeah.
And how were you feeling at this point? Can you recall?
Optimistic.
Yes.
Yes, this
Yeah.
was the upbeat.
Yeah.
You remember the negativity of the one of meeting the white horse,
Yes.
and that was totally negative, I thought.
Yeah.
Total rejection. So I suppose this had to come sooner or later if I was to get anywhere with it, and it rewarded me. You know, and I went to sleep again, so to speak. Long
Well,
rest. So that really was the
That
end of
yes, that
the
brings us to the end of that sequence.
yeah.
Well, having just finished with the Westwood
Right.
material on a very upbeat note and very optimistic, we now go back into a rather more gloomy stage.
Yeah.
We're still in this Cleve Common mythical landscape, but now we're coming back again from the Westwood up here into this stone pit area,
This section,
which I understand is a disused quarry.
yes, very
Yeah.
big one.
And you seem to spend a lot of time here looking at the quarry faces
I did.
with things emerging out of the quarry face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the first drawings I had to show was this one. A rather strange standing figure, great arm, very narrowed face, and lean, long legs. And if you look at it for a minute, it's hardly human. You can see growth on the sides of it, and it's breaking down into units of part of the rock itself. So it's a pretty downbeat scene.
Mm.
Uncomfortable.
But this presumably came quite late on this one. This is a later
I
stage, or
can't say when that came. I think it was a little frontispiece I wanted for the picture to sum up the general mood
Yeah.
I think that's what it did.
So yes, the general. So it sets the scene for the mood,
Yeah.
but the actual emergence of material
Yeah.
was a gradual process,
It was.
wasn't it?
And we
Yeah.
have a picture, you have a picture there of the first scene of the general landscape.
Which is this one.
Yeah, it's rather
Here.
small. I'd like a bigger one, but I haven't got it at this stage. This long, wide landscape here, right across, which I was able to look at it. And at first viewing, I didn't honestly find a lot in it, but gradually, by being patient and sitting with it for a while, I did notice the central bit did hold something of some interest there.
Mm.
So that was a much more
Yeah.
rewarding picture.
And here it's got almost a sort of it's a monumental feature here
Yes, that's
on
part of it as well.
Yes.
But this is the bit that I started to stay with in the reverie state of mind. So we turn the page and we'll find that image coming forward. Your image in that book may be clearer and sharper than this one. Yes, that's a different side, different colour, but it will serve.
Yeah.
So to put that, I can take that away now.
There we are.
We now find in this scene a figure striding out different directions with the head just centred there. That's the first time I saw that image, so I thought, what's this? I gave it a title, which was
Hero in the Rock.
Set in the Rock. Amusing title. But he did seem to suggest being a hero figure.
Mm.
He had a war ahead of him, he had the face.
Mm.
So that appeared there. Interesting, in this edition, I'd like to show the contrast in colour, which in some ways may show up the picture rather well, or more well defined perhaps, but just the same image. And what had it got to face? Well, there was something going on here, and that began to intrigue me. So one of the first pieces to the right of it was this image here. And I gave it a rather grim title.
Giant's head.
So very sad, heavy head in stone pit. And it doesn't look very jolly, I must say, very gloomy sort of character. But to the right of it, some figures began to appear. And that was a group of giants. And they were very large, because it's a large cliff face here.
Yes.
They're very big. So that started to appear until in this one, difficult to hold these open, we start to see the figures developing into a whole army of men marching across here.
Yes.
They were very clearly defined. And then we sank into a downbeat mood. I started to see parts of the cliff breaking down into little bits and pieces. And that led to this gloomy picture here, which I have a large-scale model.
So that's an interesting parallel between breakdown in feeling and breakdown in imagery as well.
It is, isn't it? Very much so, yes. So what have we here? A figure in the landscape with the cliff face, and a figure developing out of it, made out of bits and pieces, and the great moon above. It's not a very flat shape, because we haven't got that flat bit. Oh, here we are. Let's stand it firm. That's better. So, the downbeat moment. Very gloomy. I looked at this for a while, and I drew it at home, not on the site. It was too big to do. And it's a rather green version. I have other versions which are rather warmer in colour, but I think the greenness sets the mood rather well.
So this is the low point in this particular sequence of work, isn't
yes.
it? But it moves beyond this. You move out of this into new representations of those figures.
Yes, it becomes rather challenging. So I stayed there for a while, and forgotten how long, quite a period. And it's in the middle period, again, I'd spend about 3 or 4 years working over a period of time, once a month, once a week, depending on the mood of how much I wanted to put into it. So that was the next stage. And on from that, you turn a page, I have a conflict going on. Here it is.
Yes, and a very interesting conflict as well, in terms of what comes out of the imagery.
Well, first of all, there seems to be a fight going in. I'm in the middle of a tussle between ladies pulling me apart for a start, so a very uncomfortable place of mind. Ladies I knew, so to speak, who was doing a bit of battle, and Granny in the background watching on. So we were going back to childhood here, all right, no doubt about it. Very gloomy. Then facing a lady in a very downbeat mood. And that I somewhere do have a large painting for that, alas.
It's a powerful image.
Hmm?
It's a powerful image.
It is, isn't it? Yes. Rejection, push away, push away. No, none of this, you know. So that wasn't wanted. So then that led me to think, yes, somebody's got to stand up to this. And so I got a large picture, and I'll have to turn around and pick that one up and then face the right way. Just take the top piece down. So here's our next image.
Yeah.
And I'll swing round just for a moment to view it. And you'll see we've got a very large face here indeed. And we give him a title, don't we, which is
The Old Warrior.
The Old Warrior. He's been in the war a long time, you can see that. He's looking very gloomy and downbeat. He's got slashes cut through him. Let's imagine he's in Victorian time. He's got to be patched up, so he'd be sewn up, so you find a few stitches here and there where he's been replaced. And he'd know he'd have to go on fighting for the rest of his days, so it has that very downbeat mood. And it's almost like a warrior, what would it be, Roman
Yes,
shape
yeah.
coming around the top, encased on this side. So he's used to battle.
Yeah.
And he'll fight all his life. That's what he's for.
So are we looking at a crouching figure here, or are we just looking at the head of a figure? Because it's interesting, this one, I can't see the image in there.
Can you not?
To me, it's an abstract. So trace us out the image,
you see
Chris.
the two eyes, can't you? His eyes half closed and this closed.
Oh,
So
so
here's
it's,
his mouth.
now it's there.
Yeah.
Yes, now it's
Here's
there.
the big nostril protecting
Yes,
the front
I've got
of
it.
the nose.
I've got it. It's a front-on
chin.
view of the face.
Yes,
Yes.
you've got to get back to the right
Yes.
distance to see it. But he's
Isn't
there.
that interesting? And now it's there.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
Yes,
He's
it
been
won't be
badly
long.
cut about, you know, slashed.
Yes.
So he's a warrior.
Yes.
In the days when medical practice was rather limited, you know, you get someone to have a stitch, needs to put a few stitches in
Yeah.
and keep him going for the next battle.
He actually looks like the original Doctor Who, William Hartnell. Do you remember him from the 60s?
Yeah.
Yes.
So there it is, a gloomy picture indeed, which leads finally to the next picture, where we have meeting, the little one you're looking at the bottom right.
This one here.
Well, that was, I suppose, interesting because it's very small and it does show one thing, the old warrior, is the fact, I find him in the stone pit itself, I find a self-image here, the two faces, the nose.
Minus the mouth.
is missing.
Yes, now
That's
I
the
can
lower
see
part
that
of
very
the temple.
clearly. Yeah.
And so I thought that is another part of this creature, really.
Mm.
And then we moved on to the final page, where I confront none other than the Amazon,
Yeah.
the fighting lady, and she's well armed, and I'm standing in the background. So the outcome of that is not ever.
So here she is. This is the Amazon. Yes,
face.
and a shield here.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So it's fairly abstract as well. but-
And this is you at the back.
yes, and here's the face. She's sort
Yes.
of pausing. What's going to come next? Is he going to challenge? And it does look that it's likely to happen. So it ended on that beat, upbeat slightly, and
Mhm.
at least challenging.
Yes.
So that was the end of that sequence. Right. So in the final sequence on the Cleve Common, we're now going to look down the scene here, and the view we're looking at is on this curve down towards the Postlip Hall, which is at the bottom, just there, that little piece. And here we see it. I'm not sure if this is in the way slightly. Does it intrude much, or is that all right? Does it need to come down? Right. So there we have it, a long view looking down the valley. This is a source of water coming right at the bottom, and runs down, and the post-slip hall is down in this section here. It's a great big expanse of rock, and this is what you look at when you're looking due north.
And you're looking across to the hills of Wales
That's right. And,
here, yes.
Yes, there's some famous places up on the top to view as well. So it's a lovely view. I enjoyed that view very much. Very naturalistic painting. No attempt at any abstraction or anything else. And it contains these very simple images here. And it's a very short sequence indeed. So here's the scene as was, and this picture above, in a different shape, and different times of year. I think I mentioned it in some instances. Autumn. Here.
Yeah.
November, and the whole mood and colour is changing. But it's a recessed valley like this. We're looking into a valley, which is implicit of something more than that.
So inevitably,
the
shapes
female.
start to emerge.
Yes, the feminine shape down in here in the valley.
Yeah.
And this very pale one doesn't show up at all well. It is a rather pale painting, I admit, emphasises that even more. And other versions of it. This has to be seen in the book to make anything of it, really.
Yes.
It can't be visual.
But we're seeing the form emerge, which takes on a quite dramatic state later, doesn't it?
In this instance, it certainly does. There's a real one. This was in New Zealand when I was painting over there, and it had some of that quality of fire. Certainly not the same scene, although this one is the same scene, and this great rock shape here, the sun and moon up together, and something going on here. So this was a real tug of war. I haven't got that one. That one was sold.
But it's interesting how the post-slip work caused you to revisit the New Zealand landscapes and look at the comparisons. Look at what the two landscapes were telling you. These forms
drew them together.
Yes.
Made a tie-up. Yes, I think that's possible. But this became a very strong image, and this one is the next one I'm now going to show as I developed it. Which again is behind me. It's on the wall, so I'm going to bring it off the wall, bring it down, because I need to have it much closer, I think. I wonder if we could impose it on top in front. It might just stand on there. It's fairly heavy.
Yeah.
Let's test it.
no, I think it's all right. It'll stay.
So, here we are.
This is a very dramatic landscape, Chris, and it's got echoes of Sutherland again, hasn't it?
It's an important landscape. I just like the text for this, just to remind me. I did this painting quite a while ago, and I just want to revive something from it. Here we are. Darkness at noon. And it certainly is really dark and gloomy. It didn't start like that. It was much more upbeat. I'd started a wet afternoon of this, and I decided to overwork it from an earlier painting of the scene. And I got familiar with this scene, because that scene's that one, but it's in a different mood altogether. And looking across slightly in the other direction, more to the right. So here's the valley coming down as before, two sloping sides. And it was in pale pink colours and so on. It's very light-hearted. I thought, And it began quietly enough. It was a warm glow of colours. Lean towards the sentimental, I said. And I don't like the word sentimental. It wasn't my line at all in this word. Not anything of what I wanted to convey. And yet suddenly I was so outraged, I picked up a black brush, loaded with paint, and worked it visibly across the surface and dragged it across. And you can see the way it drags through here when I actually painted it. The marks are still left.
Yeah.
And sweeping down this way. And then I looked at it for quite a long time, just kept glancing at it. And I paused for a moment for the next thing I was going to do, and then put the pen down. And I was complete. I knew then it was complete. And I put the brush down, and there was a resolution about it. And I found all the conflicts I'd had about these images of the mother vanished, went away. So it was the end of the story. It was a very moving picture.
And very sudden and dramatic end to the story.
Yes, it came alive for me. It was an extraordinary experience, really. And it had resolved itself. And there's some interesting images in it. You probably noticed this figure in particular, or perhaps you haven't. There's the face there.
Yes.
It's upside down. So it's an inverted Christ. And some of the other figures are sided there.
Which
or
of
at
course
least it
takes
hints
us
at
back to it takes us back to the early part of where we started. Yes, with that imagery.
I think that's right, really. So that was the change.
So this really brings to an end the mythic landscape
Yes.
section, doesn't it? You
Yes.
you feel at this point you had a resolution,
Yeah,
and your work in that landscape really came to an end at that point until later we move on to we'll say a little about Pyromania, which is a completely different story, but it closed the book on this part of the work at this stage, didn't it?
It opened up to the whole idea of who was the Joker and why was he there. So we're now going to look at the Joker in the full as far as we can, but that was a very important feature indeed.
And do you still regard this as one of the sort of seminal works that you've done?
I'm not sure it's the best picture of the lot in the end. You know.
Yes, I'm not talking artistically, I'm talking about symbolically, you know, what it means to you, this picture.
Oh yes, it certainly carried out. It uplifted all the dark bits and doubts I'd had in the past about mother, or lack of mother, and all the rest of it. So it tied it together with all the dream works that I've done, which we don't show. So much of the dream work is a whole new section, which I haven't dealt with.
Yeah.
So yes, it was an upbeat picture, very much. So at this stage, I think we move on again and open up the Joker.
Well, Chris,
Yeah.
it's been a long journey through this work, and now we come to the finale, the emergence of the Joker.
Yeah.
Of course, the Joker had emerged at various stages, but hadn't been recognised. But now we're getting to the stage where the Joker is taking on a very discernible form, and then you're able to reflect back and see that the Joker had been there all the time.
That's
in
right.
fact,
Very much so. Right. So where do you want to begin? I'll look at that one ready. It's going to be important. So here is the original drawing of part 2 of our book, when I described one figure in it as not very reverent. I didn't recognise it for what it was. The other figures did. It was about me falling into a pit, and the pit was supposed to be black, and of course I left it white. It wasn't black at the time, but it was white. But this figure, who is he? So I thought I must enlarge that so it could be seen more clearly.
and remember, we looked at this picture very early on in our discussions. It was part of that original breakdown, wasn't it? That sense of falling.
Yeah. So here he is now, somewhat enlarged. I've concentrated just on that figure, and what a strange character he is. Is he laughing? Possibly. And he's got a rib cage. What's that got to do with me? Didn't mean a thing. So I really think I ought to open it up a bit. And then the next one that came along, or was it the next one? Because during this looking at pictures, I found another image here, somewhere here. If you'd like to pause for a moment on that. I've mislaid that one. Oh, here they are, underneath. Okay, ready to go on. These 4 pictures I painted fairly soon after this original one above. 2 were now destroyed. They were burnt. I threw them away. I wasn't satisfied. What an idiot. But anyway, these 2 I kept, and I just enlarged them. Those 2 there. And here he is again. But now I begin to recognise him. What's he doing with his cap? I mean, what's it all about? I've got the column coming down, now is attached to, and comes right down, and it's obviously a figure without a body. I mean, it's a corpse, isn't it? And there he is. And then I've shown another image of him here, also passed, but it doesn't quite connect up, and I didn't give him a head. So in a way, this preceded this one. This came after. There was really a mix-up. I couldn't identify what was going on.
And at this stage, you're going back over your work, and you're
trying
finding,
to trace the origins.
yes, you're looking again. It's almost like looking at the rock face, and things are emerging, but they're re-emerging here.
Absolutely. So it's all coming together now. I'd discovered this figure much earlier and still didn't really identify with him. I put him to one side until somewhere along the line he clicked. And I thought, good God, this is my own image. This is something I've drawn of myself. And I didn't want to identify with it originally, but I thought, I've got to accept it now for what it is. So I had to devise a book cover for this book. So how did I go about it? Well, I started with one of the original images.
Which we've looked at earlier,
It's
yes.
a very early picture, the
Of
childhood of the Joker.
In the
call
cot,
it.
yes.
But there's no Joker in that picture, not at all. It's me in hospital when I was about 9 and confined, very much confined. Those are the days when you couldn't get viewings more than about once a week for a child. So it was a Saturday afternoon for me, more or less. That's the only time Mum was allowed to visit. So it's a pretty gloomy aspect, really, I think. So in the distant picture, there's Mum walking away or coming, depends which way. I think he's coming. And I wanted to enliven that, bring it to life in some way. It wasn't sufficient in itself. When I was asked to do the book and to design a preface, an inner cover for it, I thought, well, I've got to turn it into something. Well, there were already trees around. I got the image in the cot. So here was one of the first images. I enclosed it, and the plants became flowers. My head became the knob of the Joker face, and little twigs on either side became the eyes, and then we had the figure. The Joker began to appear. The child just remained as stone. He's still asleep. So that was the next.
And this has become the iconic figure,
yes,
hasn't it? It's
very
it's the
much.
figure that defines the book, and really, in a sense, defines the whole body of work. But there are other parts of this story which you set out very clearly in the book, in terms of both the birth and the emergence of the Joker, and the Joker then taking form. And the Joker has many forms. You mentioned lots of names here. So the Joker can be jester, merry fellow, trickster, jack-in-the-box, mask maker, clown, companion, guardian angel, waker of images. So the Joker plays all these roles, and presumably this is you also playing out these roles in dealing with all of these things that you've had to deal with over a period of 20 years.
Yes, and then I had
the
to
moods
design a cover for this. They said, well, you've got to have a cover, what are you going to have? And I thought, well, something colourful. So my first shot was to do a colour like this of the Joker, rather jolly, bright colours. And then questions of cost came in. If I do it in black, it's going to be a lot cheaper than putting in full colour like that. So we settled for a very traditional Joker look. We all know what the Joker looks like, my Joker anyway. He's always on one leg, hopping. He's got a fin at the back. Here.
There's always a bit of fish about him, and there's
fishy,
yes, and fish is of course one of those things that recurs all the time in your work.
What he does have is always have a smile. Look at the face. He's a jolly fellow, and you can see he's a painter too. He's always got the brushes hanging around. So, okay, painter. And he's coming from behind, what? A bit of circus, a bit of clowning, or are we on stage? So it's a performing act, isn't it?
He's also coming out of the darkness.
He's coming out of the darkness here, it's in reverse. And I settled for that in the end. It was a much cheaper run. And it was quite adequate, and he was fine. And I had to reduce it.
Yeah, you could say here actually that he's opening up the light. I mean,
you can see it that
yes,
back to front, can't you?
Yeah.
That's right. And all the information at the bottom and so on. The birth of the Joker was very interested on the next page, where I'm being born. I have to tell you that this is one of the pictures I destroyed. And I think I mentioned at the very beginning of the book that
it's this picture here
yeah.
that was destroyed. Yeah.
I destroyed this. I destroyed 20, I think I told you at the time.
Mm.
And I had the habit then, knowing I did this once or twice, take photographs.
Mm.
So this was a photograph before it was destroyed. But it was an important picture. It in the gloom of the cellar. And there he is. And that's the fetus there. He's likely to
Yes,
go on
show us on this picture, Chris, so the camera can pick it up.
And he would grow out of one of the figures we had in the image of the, what do we give it a title? I've forgotten the name of it, the form. It's slipped my memory, but he's within a womb shape.
Yes, and there are skeletal elements in there as well.
Yeah, and we have to the left somebody up on his legs, and I called him the sort of the birth maker. He's the chap who's going to see that he's born safely. And on the right, the Joker with his big horns, and he's prancing. He always likes to stamp his leg down, I felt. He was one of those sort of characters, impatient sort of character. So that was that. That moved on. That was the birth scene.
Interesting that you destroyed that, isn't it?
It was. I mean,
yes.
It didn't add up, really.
And can you remember why you destroyed it? Was it because you were not satisfied with it as a piece of art, or was it that it was telling you something which you just didn't want to deal with at that time?
Well, that's an interesting point. I didn't query it. I just thought this isn't good enough. I think that was the mood, really.
Yeah.
Yes. So we move on a page or two, and we showed a few scenes of flippancy and whatnot. Your book's got a slightly bigger picture.
Yeah. Here we are.
That was the final scene, a bit of colour in it. Then I'm skipping and dancing a bit, kicking out. You notice the Joker has a habit of tending to stretch his arms out, wide stretch. That was a fairly big feature. Here he is dancing on stage with a little stick. And then he's in the wombs of a great mother image, shrunken right down his side. And that comes out from a novel of the American author. God, I mentioned it here, I can't.
The Joker's trickster.
Yes, the name of the character. Can't remember his name. Perhaps I don't put it.
No, it's not in there.
Oh, it isn't.
No.
Anyway, he comes into an American story of the chap who's on the subject of the woman, and he's never quite free. And then he goes on stage. He's going on stage. Very dark picture here, and gloomy. He's holding on to the woman who's his companion, supporter really. Never quite sure himself. Dark moods, light moods, performing upstage on the top.
You say in this, you describe this picture a lot in the text.
Yeah.
This is actually an important image, isn't it? Because you're trying to balance out all sorts of things, light and dark, and I can't remember the detail, but you talk about equilibrium between highs and lows, light and shade, depression and elation. So in a sense, this picture is to show the alternation between these moods and these feelings.
He's one of the images in the early stages of the book.
Yes.
It's the last picture in the book.
Yes, but he's taken on a new form here, a new manifestation, influenced by the Joker.
Well, very much, yeah. And then we have the downbeat one, the old clown. I used to go to the theatre sometimes, always interested in it, and I sometimes viewed people round the side in the wings, and they looked terribly glum, and they'd the ones who'd been fooling around on stage, being as jolly as life, and here they were, very downbeat, not a bit like that. So that showed the character of the clown too, I thought. I put it in that mood. And then finally, well, nearly finally, we're coming to an important phase now of how the Joker himself is used, and I have to get a big picture in the moment. First of all, here he is with his dog, having a walk. I call him the quest of the Joker, almost looking for myself as I walk along. And then a very big picture's got to be superimposed yet again on top of this, which I'll just get up and bring it across and lay it on top of all this, or we take all this away, I think. We can lift it all down. it might take the weight because it's not inside a frame. It might just about carry it, but it is big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a chest holder, I think. The last but one. Just find the page. No, Twee, you had the page just a moment ago. Here we are. So, various aspects of the Joker, of the psyche. So on the left, we have a rather frail little creature. Doesn't look like it's going to survive for very long. And just behind him, a warmonger. You can see he's all braced up with all these medals, award quotations, things he's awarded and so on. Not a nice figure at all. And he's dragging her into this. A pretty dark place. Notice we're still on the stage. This is performance act. And he's so well off, he's so wealthy, he's got lots of goods. So he offers it to the glutton. The glutton's made out of a multitude of figures and so on. Quite amusing. He's got one grabbed in his mouth. He's got another in his hand here. And little images within it.
They're all fish again.
Lots of fishy stuff here. And he is offering it, finally, to the creature on the right. The much more upbeat Joker. Got all the fruits of the earth here, held up high. He's prancing forward. And that leads to the final picture, which is the Joker. But in that form, he's not quite like that. So I have to pick up the final picture and how it became that. I think we can slide that along fractionally. Probably won't stand it. That's about it, isn't it? Yeah. So you can see how it's modified a bit. The head has now got a shape to it. I don't know if that focuses well. You see, I think I better turn myself round. Just you hold that a moment. Right, there we are. You can see the connection. We've still got the fruits of the earth up here. The face has been developed, so he's got a real smile, and he's skipping along. I call him Zany Prancer. He's zany, he's a nutty case, you know. And he's prancing along. So this finishes the book. This is the final page. And you've got a text at the final page.
Yes, I have.
The last line gives the clue of what it was all about. So he's the summing up of the whole story.
Yes, he encapsulates the essence of the book, countering the ambiguities of strange meeting, which is this one, the prancing movement, the fragmentary structure of the figure, the bearer of the earth's fruit, the warmth of colours. All of these attributes symbolise the optimistic nature of the continuing fantasy of dream and reverie inherent in Joker. Out of the fears and incomprehensions of the pictorial story of the breakout, personal history grew a defensive system which clarified this confrontational material. The story continues.
The story continues is the key to it, really. So at the end of the book, it wasn't to imply that was the end of anything, by any means. It was the opening of more development, which I'd like to deal with. So we've come to the end of the book, and I'd like what?
Okay, so the book, Chris, in its second edition, in fact, because it's now been through 2 printings, is actually available, and the details of how you get the book can be found on your website, which is www.thejoker, and there's a hyphen between the and the Joker, .me.uk, and that will tell people how they can get the book and the cost.
And it is rather high, so I can offer it at a discount for those who are studying the subject.
Yes.
Yeah. Whether I should state the cost and so on, that I don't know.
No, they can find out from the website.